Brazil was everything I dreamed it would be. Warm sun, vibrant music, and miles of golden sand stretching as far as the eye could see. Miles, my best friend and perpetual thrill-seeker, had planned every detail of our trip. He swore up and down it would be life-changing. So, when he suggested we visit a unique, authentic snake massage spa, I hesitated. The very mention of snakes made my stomach churn, but Miles laughed off my concerns.
Come on, man,
he said, grinning from ear to ear.
It's all the rage. People say it's therapeutic. Plus, what's the point of a vacation if we don't try something crazy?
Against my better judgment, I agreed. The spa was tucked away in a narrow alley, its faded sign barely legible under the dim streetlights. The door creaked ominously as we entered, and the air inside was thick with the mingling scents of incense and damp earth.
Relax,
Miles said, clapping me on the shoulder.
It's supposed to feel ancient, authentic.
The receptionist, a tall woman with piercing green eyes, led us into a room that looked like a jungle terrarium. Vines hung from the ceiling, and the ground slithered. Hundreds of snakes of varying sizes and colors writhed on the floor, their scales catching the dim light like tiny shards of glass. Okay, nope, I'm out. I whispered, my voice cracking, but Miles was already stepping out of his shoes.
They're harmless, non-venomous. Just let them crawl around a bit. It's supposed to be good for circulation.
He lowered himself onto the snake-covered floor, leaning back with a satisfied sigh as the creatures began slithering over his legs.
See? Totally fine,
he said, waving me over. My body refused to move, but Miles's teasing was relentless. Eventually, I convinced myself to take a single step. The moment my bare foot touched the floor, the cold, slimy texture of a snake's scales brushed against my skin. I froze. Another snake curled around my ankle, its tiny, harmless bite sending a strange, tingling sensation up my leg. My heart raced, but as more snakes swarmed around me, I began to feel oddly numb.
Not so bad, right?
Miles grinned. I wanted to scream at him, but my throat was dry. The next phase of the treatment was supposed to be deep relaxation. We were led to 2 massage tables and instructed to lie face down. The room was dark now, lit only by flickering candles. The snakes had been cleared from the floor, but the eerie hissing sound remained, echoing faintly through the walls. As I lay there, the sensation of something smooth and heavy rolling across my back made me shudder. It's just part of the process, I whispered to myself. Breathe. It's fine. For a moment, I managed to relax. The weight moving along my spine felt oddly soothing, like a warm compress. But then I felt it slither up my shoulder. That's not a hand, I muttered, eyes snapping open. The sight that greeted me froze my blood. A massive snake was coiled around Miles, its thick body constricting him like a vice. He looked at me, gasping for air, but he was smiling.
It's fine. These snakes are trained. His
voice broke off into a choking wheeze as the snake tightened its grip. Panic surged through me. Miles! I shouted, jumping off the table. But before I could reach him, something heavy dropped onto my back. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. It was another snake. This one was even larger, its muscular body wrapping itself around my chest and shoulders. Its scales were cold and rough, scratching against my skin as it coiled tighter and tighter. I clawed at it, trying to free myself, but the more I struggled, the tighter it squeezed. My vision blurred as my chest heaved. Desperate for air, I could hear Miles screaming now, his voice a hoarse, guttural cry.
Help me!
I tried to look at him, but the snake's tail wrapped around my neck, pinning my head in place. My pulse pounded in my ears as the edges of my vision darkened. With one final burst of adrenaline, I threw myself sideways off the table. The snake's grip loosened just enough for me to suck in a ragged breath. I hit the floor hard, the impact jolting through my ribs, but I was free. For a moment I lay there, gasping and disoriented. Then I heard it, a low, guttural hiss. I turned my head just in time to see the snake lunging toward me, its massive jaws unhinged and gaping wide. I scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The snake's mouth engulfed me, its sharp teeth slicing into my skin as it began to swallow me whole.
For many people, having to care for an adult baby is a burden. But for a single mother cast out by society like me, my son is everything. Taking care of him and expressing my motherhood rights is the only thing that brings balance to my humble life. My life is a mess, lived under the oppression of others. More than once I've thought about ending my life. But when little Kevin appeared, nestled in my arms with his black eyes looking up at me so trustingly, I found meaning and a purpose for my life. I am a mother, and this child is entirely mine. Since Kevin came into my life, everything has brightened. I can do anything to give him the best life possible. But as Kevin grew older, the bond between us began to fade. He grew up healthy and capable, becoming my pride. Yet the feeling that he was slipping out of my control left me feeling unhappy. Sometimes I wished Kevin could go back to those days when he was still small. Then those fleeting thoughts suddenly became reality when Kevin fell severely ill, losing his ability to care for himself. I knew this was the time he needed me the most. It was as if I were reliving the days when Kevin was a small child. Every day I fed him, played with him, and helped him with his hygiene. Kevin struggled to digest food, so I gave him formula. After noticing how difficult it was to clean Kevin when he wore regular pants, I suddenly thought of dressing him in a bodysuit, just like when he was a baby. That outfit turned out to be incredibly practical, and it suited Kevin perfectly. Kevin would often hurt himself trying to roll off the bed. I suddenly thought that I should create a softer, warmer, and safer space for him, like a crib. Kevin, with his legs gradually withering away, obediently sat still in the crib. That gave me an unusual sense of satisfaction. Lately, Kevin had been very well behaved, so over the weekend, I decided to take him outside as a reward. But all that good behavior he'd shown me was just a scheme. The raspy sound of Kevin's voice calling out for help to the police sent me into a panic.
Why do you have such a large stroller?
Kevin was pleading for help from someone other than me. He was trying to escape from my love. Officer, it's just a misunderstanding, I explained calmly. You see, my son's mental state is a bit unstable, and his legs are also not convenient for moving. The officer glanced disdainfully at Kevin, a look that unsettled me, but I knew I had achieved my goal. No one would believe Kevin now, not even me, and Kevin would pay the price for his deceit. Once we got home, Kevin and I had a heated argument. It turned out that he had been quietly rebelling against me all along. Kevin pointed at his twisted leg, angrily accusing me of ruining his life.
Mom, you've destroyed everything for me!
I did everything for you because you tried to abandon me. My world consisted only of me and Kevin, so when Kevin said he wanted to move out to study in another state, I vehemently opposed it. Yet, Kevin remained determined to leave me. I would never accept any act of rebellion from my only son. I would do whatever it takes to keep Kevin by my side, even if it meant resorting to the most extreme measures.
I hate you! You're crazy!
My goal had been achieved. Kevin was staying with me, so I was willing to overlook some of his rebellious moments.
Stay away from me!
But things had gone too far. I felt that there was no longer any common ground between Kevin and me. So I decided to turn Kevin into a real child, one who only knew how to eat, sleep, and play with his mother, who would cry for food, not speak, and not resist. Kevin lay on the bed, his fearful gaze breaking my heart. But above all, he had to pay for the times he had shattered my mother's heart. Don't be scared, my love. Just bear the pain for a little while, I said softly. The only way for us to find harmony was for one of us to remain silent forever. From now on, Kevin would be a child, and I would care for him eternally. From that day on, my son and I could finally live in harmony. I could feel Kevin becoming more dependent on me. He started sleeping more, just like a real child. From now on, we could be together forever.
Where's my child?
I was desperate. Rent was due, bills were piling up, and I had no job prospects. When I saw the posting for a night guard position at West Market, I jumped at it. The pay was decent, and the store was only a few blocks away. What could possibly go wrong? The store itself was old, a relic from another time, tucked away in a crime-ridden part of town. The sign was faded, the windows coated with dust, and the lights flickered like they were on their last legs. Mr. Briggs, the manager, greeted me with a half smile and handed me a list of rules.
Follow these carefully. If you break them, well, let's just say it won't end well.
I skimmed the rules, finding them bizarre, but I nodded along. I needed the money, and I wasn't about to question his strange instructions. 1. Patrol the store every half hour. You may spend the rest of your time in the break room, monitoring the security cameras. 2. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. 3. If you hear knocking from the freezers, ignore it. 4. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been put away, return it to the front of the store. 5. If you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle, clean it up, but don't step in it or touch it directly. 6. If you see a woman in the store, go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not make eye contact with her. 7. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. I laughed nervously as I read the last rule. Sounds like you've had some weird nights here, I joked, but Mr. Briggs didn't smile. His gaze was hard, almost haunted.
Just follow the rules.
The first patrol was uneventful. The flickering lights and the eerie silence set my nerves on edge, but everything seemed fine. I avoided aisle 7 like the plague, though I couldn't help but feel an odd pull toward it. Every time I passed it, there was an unsettling heaviness in the air, as if the aisle was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone. 30 minutes later, I started my second patrol. The store felt darker, more oppressive, as if the walls were closing in. As I reached the frozen food section, I heard it, knocking. It was faint, rhythmic, coming from within the freezers. My heart raced. I took a step closer, tempted to open the door, but the rule flashed in my mind. Ignore it. I turned away, my hands trembling. On my way back, I noticed a shopping cart sitting in the middle of an aisle. I could have sworn it hadn't been there before. I pushed it back to the front of the store, but as I did, I felt something slick on my hand. Blood. I looked down in horror. My fingers were coated in a thick, sticky substance. My heart pounded in my chest as I wiped it off on my pants, trying not to panic. Then I saw it, a pool of blood in the meat aisle. It was spreading slowly, a dark red stain against the floor. I remembered the rule. Don't step in it. Don't touch it. I ran to the storage closet, grabbed a mop and bucket and cleaned the mess as quickly as I could. But the more I mopped, the more blood there seemed to be. My stomach churned, but I finished the job, my hands shaking. Back in the break room, I found an old notebook stashed in a drawer. It was a journal left behind by previous guards. Flipping through the pages, I read about strange occurrences. Carts moving on their own, eerie knocks from the freezers, and the woman. Every entry mentioned her. Then I found it, the story of Mrs. Smith. She had lost her son in the store, gunned down by robbers in aisle 7. After that, she went mad, convinced he was still alive, keeping him from getting lost again. But when she realized he was truly gone, she started taking out her grief and rage on anyone who dared to break the rules. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, and then stopped. For a moment, I thought I was safe. But then the curiosity hit me like a wave. I had to know if she was still there. I looked at the camera back to aisle 7. That's when I saw her. A woman, her hair disheveled, her clothes torn, stood at the end of the aisle, cradling something in her hands. No, not something. A gun. The same one the robbers had used to kill her son. I felt her eyes bore into me through the screen. Cold, hollow, filled with hate. I had made eye contact. I had broken the rule. Her lips curled into a snarl and she moved. Fast. My body acted on instinct. I threw the door open and ran. Her footsteps were loud, echoing through the store, chasing me. A gunshot rang out, the bullet barely missing my head. I zigzagged between aisles trying to stay ahead of her, but she was relentless. Another shot. I ducked behind a shelf, then another. The bullets whizzed past me, and I knew I wouldn't last much longer. I couldn't end my shift early. The rule! The goddamn rule! But I had to get out of there. My only chance was to trick her. With my heart hammering in my chest, I lured her toward the back of the store. Her eyes gleamed with madness, her fingers trembling on the trigger. Just as she fired the last shot, I dived out of the way, and the bullet shattered the lock on the back door. The door swung open and I bolted through it, stumbling into the night. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out. When I finally looked back, the store was quiet again, dark and still. But I knew it wasn't over. West Market still stood, hiding its secrets in the shadows. And Mrs. Smith, she was still there, waiting for her next victim.